One other thing I want to do, Bill, I didn't tell you this, but I want each of us just to share very briefly why we got into biologic dentistry. So I'm going to share my story in a second. Bill, just share that real quickly right before you start, because we get asked that too. How'd you get into it? You know, I know why I'm here, but how did you get into it? So for me, 1990, there was a 60-minute show where they talked about the whole mercury amalgam issue. And I was in dental school, so I'm aging myself here a bit. And if you watch this, and I cut 60 seconds out of about a 25-minute show, but these 60 seconds were so telling to me, and you'll see, and you'll probably even laugh a little bit, but when I saw that, it made me at least raise my eyebrows, because I was in school being told the same things you guys have been taught, and it made sense to me. But when the show came out, it made me think, wow, what's going on? And then when I started to question a bit, I got a lot of pushback. So I just thought there was something there from 1990. So hopefully the sound is good, Dave. We're good? Okay, let's try it.
If it's so volatile, so dangerous in a dentist's hands, how on earth can it be safe in our mouths?
Only you got to understand how amalgam really works. If it's in a free form, the mercury that is in the amalgam is dangerous. But when it forms with the copper, the tin, the zinc, and the silver that make up the amalgam filling, it becomes a stable compound at that time. Once it is mixed and placed in the patient's mouth, it is a stable compound, and it does not constitute a risk.
Once it hardens,
correct,
it's safe.
Right.
What do you do with your scrap amalgam?
What we do in our own practice is we keep it in a jar that has glycerin in the jar. We pull the scrap in there and put a top on it. So it is not exposed in any way. It's in an airtight jar all the time.
Why? Given if
that is the recommended way of taking care of it in a dental office. That is what's been recommended by the scientists. So that's the way we do it.
But if it's so perfectly safe in this combined state.
But Marley, you got to understand, when we're saving this stuff, we've got a big jar of it. You got to realize I'm in that office 5 days a week with this material. I do not want to go in there with an open container like that. I want to be as safe as I can.
So yeah, did everybody? If it's, you know, he's going on about how it's safe once it's mixed, and Morley got him. But so the next day, so that was on Sunday. On Monday, they had an emergency meeting of all 4 dental. You know, we never have all 4 years together jammed in the auditorium, and they basically said, look, there was a very biased story on last night. It's not true. You'll get a lot of questions. Just tell them it's safe and don't worry about it. End of meeting. So here we are. All right. Let's get to our first speaker, Bill Virtue. He practices in Yadkinville, North Carolina. He's here. I got him. We're good. Bill Virtue practices in Yadkinville, North Carolina. He is our current secretary. He's a past president. He's a fellow. He's a good guy. And he's going to be teaching you guys Mercury 101. All right, everybody, Dr. Bill Virtue.
Sorry about that delay. Thank you. I've been running around this complex, the convention center, trying to find this room. I got up at 5:30, so it'd be plenty ready, and I was late. That shows us what you know sometimes ain't so. Well, great. I'm glad everybody's here. This is a big crowd for the fundamentals. I practice in a small town called Yadkinville, North Carolina. I'm an Indiana graduate, 1979, and as Griffin was talking, when that 60 Minutes thing came out, I remember very distinctly when it did. In fact, I was on an airplane sometime soon after that, heading to Colorado to ski. My buddy and I, who was also a dentist, we sat there and wrote almost a letter to whoever agreeing with what that guy was saying. Now I graduated in 79, so Griffin, that was what, 11 years later or something, I don't know, 10 years later. So I was in that side 100% for a long time. And my transformation came, a friend of mine who was anti-mercury at the time, a real, a rogue guy, I guess. He was a great guy, great dentist, tried to teach me and get me into the problems with mercury, the amalgam. So when his persuasion, I attended a meeting in Durham, North Carolina, some 20 years ago with the IAOMT. At that time, we may have had 100 members, I don't know, but It was a small group, and the weirdest dental meeting I've ever been to, because there was no talk about teeth. Everything was conversation about mercury or fluoride and the dangers of it, and even the carcinogenic effect of some of the anesthetics we use. Well, this is just blasphemy. I've never heard this before. This was absolute nonsense. And these guys had ponytails and Birkenstocks, so I kind of call them the Birkenstock group. Well, that was in March. My Aunt Vi, who is my mother's sister, came down to North Carolina from New Jersey, where we all grew up, South Jersey, a little town called Woodbury. At any rate, she came down to visit, and when she laughed constantly. She had a mouthful of mercury fillings, I mean, black teeth everywhere. Well, she had Lou Gehrig's disease, was diagnosed shortly before that. Well, I started thinking about that meeting and thinking about Aunt Vi and Lou Gehrig's and her mercury, and researched a little bit and discovered, hey, there's a connection between neuromuscular diseases and mercury. Well, here I am in a mercury-rich environment, and I got family with Lou Gehrig's. And since then, 2 of her children have died from that. So it's like either I change professions or I change the way I do what I do. So that got me into what I'm doing today. So I've been in the academy for, oh golly, I've forgotten now, 20 plus years, I'm sure. And I've watched it grow to over 1,000 members. So we're real proud of that. Of course, we're going to celebrate that this weekend, our 35th year. So what we're going to talk about today may be a little blasphemy to you guys too, because it was to me. I've since learned to do it and do it well. And our practice is successful partly because of the reason that we're doing what we do. People come to us wanting to get their mercury out. Now, most times people don't come to the dentist wanting something. They got a broken tooth they want fixed, but they really don't want to be there. These people want to be there. They pay you, and they're happy about it. I call them the cookies and hug crowd because they're the ones that will hug you, give you cookies, and they're really thankful for what you've done. You haven't just fixed a tooth, you fixed a person. Now, I also say that, and we'll say it a little bit later, and I got to kind of run here because we're a little bit late, but we work with alternative physicians too. So always remember, you get the mercury out of the mouth, you're not getting it out of the body. The butt's still in the body. The physicians do that. So we don't even attempt to diagnose mercury poisoning or mercury might be in their body. All we do is fix the teeth, get the mercury out of the mouth, which is the source of the mercury in the body. So we do that in a very controlled method. You'll see later how we do it. It'll look a little strange to you if you're new to this because it's evolved. When I first started, I think all we had was a high-speed suction. And then over the years, we've evolved into all kinds of different apparatus and techniques that protect not the patient so much. They're only there for an hour or two. But what about the staff? What about the dentist, assistants and the dentists that sit there 8 hours a day in a mercury-rich environment? That also includes the front desk because this air travels around the office with the air conditioning or the heating system. So it's not so much you're doing this for the patient. I want you to think about doing it for yourself too. All three, patient, assistant, dentist, all of them are important. So, if you're going to practice a long time, be healthy, this is the way to go. So that's my 2 cents, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. I'm going to try to get going here so you guys get lunch. I'll have to fiddle around with this a little bit. I always do. You didn't give me instructions, Dave. Usually I'm here in time to get all this stuff, but I've been running around the convention center trying to find this meeting. It isn't over there, I got to tell you. There's a big meeting over there, though. Yeah, I just pushed this up button. It didn't.
Okay. So what we'll do is just...
I speak kind of quickly, so we'll get through this. So can I push this?
Go the other way.
This one?
Yeah.
Down? Oh, okay.
And then the green light.
Yeah,
will
okay.
give you a little...
All right, down. Okay, cool.
I'm going to put this in the tooth of the camera that's going to follow you around.
Oh, okay. I don't move too much. No, you don't. All right. We'll get started. Mercury basic, chemistry, exposure regulations, and history. All right, that's pretty simple. Mercury amalgam fillings, silver fillings are often referred to as silver, and they're 50% mercury and they're 50% combination of copper, silver, tin. We know that. We've been through dental school or assisting school. By the way, how many hygienists in here? Wow, a lot. Yeah. Are you guys, by and large, familiar with the mixture of amalgam? You know it's got 50% mercury? Is that a pretty understood thing? Okay. Created by a mixing process called titration. We know that. And a major reason biological dentistry is needed. Okay, there's a picture of some really pretty teeth. All right. Now, the glossary dentistry terms that are relevant. Mercury-free, those folks that by and large don't place mercury fillings. Okay, now How many people in here eliminated mercury? Okay, pretty good showing. Yeah, congratulations. They don't place amalgam fillings. Mercury-Safe, they're the ones that use the rigorous techniques to control the mercury vapor so that the dentist, the assistant, and the patient don't absorb it. How many years of absorption have we had? I've just gone through, I go through almost constant chelation, and my mercury levels the last time we checked were kind of indetectable. So you can get it out of your body, but again, an alternative physician. And a biologic or biocompatible dentist is a mercury-free, mercury-safe, and considers the impact of dental materials on the patient. In other words, they're going to use some testing, some blood testing to find out the antigen-antibody reaction. We'll talk about that later, what materials I can use in that mouth. Not everybody can have Empress or Emax. Not everybody can have particular composite that you might be using. Even the etch, sometimes you can't use that because they're sensitive to it. But you can get this tested and find out exactly what you can use, and that's what we do for the patients that want it. Not everybody wants it. The test is $250 or something like that. Some people just say, nah. But we've gotten to the point now where we have gotten good enough at our science that we can just about 99% of the time use what we normally use on people because they're not going to be allergic to the products that we have defined. What is mercury? Well, it's obviously a heavy metal, atomic number of 80. It's the only metal that's liquid at room temperature, vaporizes, colorless, odorless, tasteless, and at negative 38 degrees centigrade, it starts to vaporize, and for every 10 degrees rise in temperature, it doubles the evaporation rate. And it easily oxidizes, meaning it lends an electron to something else. So it goes in the body with no charge, just Hg, and it goes through cell membranes very easily, it goes through the blood-brain barrier very easily. 80% of it is absorbed into the body through the lungs. You'll get some more of this later, but it's a bad actor and very, very reactive. May cause harmful effects to the nervous, digestive, the lungs. It's just all kinds of stuff. When you read through the list of things that mercury is responsible for, it's scary. It's almost like everything out there that can hurt you, mercury's been associated with. That doesn't mean everybody's affected that way, but it can affect us that way. Attention development delays during childhood, and we don't know a threshold that mercury is safe at. That's one thing the ADA said for so long is that, oh, there's mercury coming off these fillings, but it's not enough to matter. Well, who knows how much is enough to matter? I'm allergic to poison ivy. You may not be. That's the only thing I'm allergic to. So we're all sensitive to something, and we all absorb this mercury. It's a lot about how easily you get rid of the heavy metals and how many of us retain heavy metal, whether they're secreting or we're non-secretors. But this is very important because there's no threshold that we can declare safe. Every threshold is dangerous. Now, this is the sources of exposure, and what you can see here, this big orange part is dental amalgam. So in our daily life, you hear about, oh my God, don't eat tuna. Well, it's probably wise not to eat a lot of tuna, particularly. The thing is, when the fish, the older the fish is, the king of the sea kind of fish are the ones that have accumulated the mercury from the little guys. Shrimp probably don't have a whole lot of mercury in them. Oysters, if you don't get hepatitis, they're probably safe. But when you get up into the bigger food chain, the fish have mercury in them. And we can go in later why they're not affected. I can explain that if you'd like. But you can see food and air and water. So really the 90%, and this is the World Health Organization saying this. This isn't us. So 90% of our intake of mercury comes from our dental amalgams. And if you're a dentist, it's almost insignificant because your intake's coming from your operatories or your assistant. Hygienists a little bit, protected because unless you polish amalgams, don't ever polish amalgams. So a little history of dental amalgam is that amalgam filling has been placed in people's mouths for 200 years. If that's not enough reason to stop using, I don't know what else. If I went to a physician and he put a leech on me for some reason, I'd what the heck's going on here? Or maybe he wants to do some bloodletting. That's not exactly the medicine I want to have happen to me. But that's the history of how we've been using that. In the 1950s, the American Society of Dental Surgeons, which a lot of us probably haven't heard of, was a group of dentists who decided they weren't going to use amalgam mercury fillings. They were only going to use gold. Well, you can imagine gold as still today. Gold has remained relatively the same throughout history as far as its value. Its purchasing power, inflation, to the stock market. Gold has maintained its value. In fact, an ounce of gold generally used to buy a men's suit, a high-end suit, and it still does today. So back in the 1850s, it was expensive too. So they band together to eliminate, you couldn't be a member if you did mercury filling. Well, there was a bunch of dentists that said, hey man, it's hard to do, it's hard to sell, we're gonna do amalgam. Well, the amalgam users developed the ADA in 1859. They thought the mercury fillings were fine, they were easy to do, people wanted them, which was true. And so they banded together, and the American Society of Dental Surgeons started the Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore. So all this happened in Baltimore. But you can see one of the reasons that the barbers back here, barbershop, they used to be the dentist per se because they extracted teeth mostly because their chair went back. The only group of people that had a reclining chair made it much easier to do this sophisticated dentistry you see right here. All right, now you all know man as a hatter. This is part of that story. That's part of the felt industry. They would take big vats of mercury chloride and they'd put wool in there and they'd stir it over a boiling mercury pot or steaming or, at any rate, it was emitting a lot of mercury vapor. And they'd stir that, and that became known as man as a hatter because these people were nuts. They were really affected by this mercury vapor. Remember standing over this 8-hour day, 12, 14, wherever they worked back then, and stirring a pot of mercury vapor. And that's incredible. So these people really got delusional. And that became very, known as man as a hatter. And we've all heard that expression, Alice in Wonderland, or what's that? What am I thinking of? That one. What is it? No, that doesn't sound right. So in 1941, you can see that mercury, the process in the United States was banned. And yeah, I wonder why they banned it then. That's a long time ago, but they did. But they didn't ban mercury fillings. Significant dates in dental amalgam usage is 84, the National Institute of Dental Research and the ADA acknowledged that mercury vapor might come off these fillings. Today we know it. You can measure it. We'll show you a film a little bit. I'm sure maybe some of you have seen the smoking tooth video, but David Kennedy did that back, which is a cherished member of this organization many years ago. 86, the ADA enacted a resolution, still part of the code. You cannot remove mercury fillings for toxicological reasons. Now, I got to tell you, I don't ever remove them for any reason other than the patient says, I want these out. A patient comes into me, we take a bunch of photos, we take our necessary x-rays and whatever, perio-charting, and half of them come in and say, I want the mercury out. Okay, fine. I can show them with the camera all the cracks, which every mercury filling in a tooth's got a crack somewhere, I guarantee it. So I can show them the cracks, which is reason to remove that. But I don't go in there saying, look, you got to get these out. You're unhealthy, because I can't diagnose medicine. That's not my license. So what we do is, with their consent, okay, we can do that and outline the treatment plan. The people who don't come in saying, I want these mercury fillings out, they're more or less saying, I just want my teeth healthy, I want to get rid of decay, fine. We're going to treat them the same way, but we don't, have the conversation of the mercury. And surprisingly, the people who come in off the internet that want this kind of service. You're not going to get them through the newspaper. You'll get dentures and implants from the newspaper. You might get them on your web, which where they really come from. But they're not going to be somebody that's so much Facebook oriented. They're more researching, they're more looking into health. And those folks are on the web. So you need to really pay attention to your website if you're going to do this kind of work. Get it up to speed, and you've got to know what you're doing. You can't go in there. They will know if you don't use a nitrile dam. They will know if you don't use oxygen. They're going to know what you left out. So they're very aware of the process, and you can't fool them. So you got to do it. But everybody gets the same treatment. I don't care what your reason. If you come in for, I've got a broken tooth, we're going to treat that thing the same way we're going to do it with anybody else, because we're protecting them. More importantly, and I don't mean to say it quite that way, we're protecting us. We're there I've been there doing 40 years now, plus 44 with dental school. So, you can accumulate a lot of mercury in that time. The FDA Center for Device and Radiation Health classifies it as Class 2, which means moderate risk, no proof of safety required. We went through battles years ago with the FDA, spent a lot of money in the county, and we weren't able to get this rating changed. The ADA is so powerful in Washington that they rule. We finally realized that, hey, we're just, David and Goliath here. We can't fight this battle. We don't have unlimited funds. So we kind of let that go. And our marketing went from trying to fight the government over this, fighting the ADA over this, to appealing to the people and going, look this stuff, you might want to look at this and see. So that's why people are coming into us asking for this treatment. So important distinction. Okay, United Nations Environment Program, we were very influential in this. I think, didn't Griffin go to Minamata? One of us did, because we worked very hard on this. Now, I don't know how many of you know Minamata, Japan, but after World War II, I'm sorry, my phone, I thought I had it on airplane. I think I did. Anyway, Minamata, Japan, after World War II, was an area, was a bay, it's still a bay, but industrial pollution into the bay, particularly mercury, poisoned the bay. Nobody knew this, but the people, local people were fishermen fishing in that bay, eating the fish, suddenly started developing a lot of weird stuff, neuromuscular problems. And, I mean, it was documented. I don't know if it was maybe in the 50s or something, but you can reach back. So it's important that it actually was in Minamata that we had this conference. So the three aims to phase out mercury in all the world, not just the United States. The United States signed the treaty and has been ratified by over 100 nations, and it went into effect August of 17. We've been a partner, and we're still waiting for the rest of the world to join us, and for that matter, the United States to join us. Europe's far ahead of us in eliminating, banning, or reducing the use of mercury. And this goes to say that, in Norway and Sweden, they don't use it at all. Japan, Finland, Netherlands being phased out. It's not being taught in dental schools anymore in Japan. Europe, and I don't know where this is. Denmark uses only 5% of restorations, Germany about 10%. In Bangladesh, it's been banned. Who'd have thunk it? India, dental schools are required to eliminate amalgam in favor of mercury-free alternatives. In Nigeria, again, the government has printed and distributed consumer information to make the consumer, the patient, aware of the problems of mercury. And in Canada, it's recommended that dentists not use amalgam for children, pregnant women, and persons with kidney disorders. That's a step forward. The European Parliament, this is why I said Europe's ahead of us on this, ruled as of July 1/18 that dental amalgam should not be used for dental treatment of deciduous teeth of children under 15 years old, or for breastfeeding women or pregnant women. Now, you got to wonder, why would you take a group of people and say it's not okay for them, but it's okay for the rest of you? This to me, this says that we know mercury is a problem, and we just can't eliminate it all at one time, but we're going to do it over time. The United States, we're behind on it, as again, the ADA, which I know many of you are members of, and I'm not saying anything bad about the ADA, but their stand on mercury, to me, is like, and R.J. Reynolds Tobaccos in my hometown of Winston-Salem, that battle back years ago when the tobacco industry, Reynolds particularly, and the rest of Lorillard and Philip Morris, they refused to admit that nicotine was addictive, which they knew it was. They knew it was. The problem here is the ADA, in my opinion, knows it's a problem, but won't admit it because of their background. They keep saying it's safe, it's not a problem, there's not enough to bother you. And, 95% of dentists belong to that belief system. And the other thing is that the ADA sanctions the dental schools, gives them their rating. If you had a dental school come out and said, man, we don't like amalgam, the mercury's harmful, they'd have a problem with the ranking. So one of the reasons that they don't start teaching this is because of the ADA. I'm sure sooner or later the ADA is going to have to change their opinion, but for now, no. But they do admit mercury comes off amalgam fillings, mercury fillings. What happens to 80% of the mercury vapor absorbed into the body? Well, it's absorbed in the lungs and passed off to the rest of the body. 80% of that mercury vapor, you're sitting there with that patient, you're absorbing into the lungs, which gets into the rest of the body. Liver, lung, kidney, gastrointestinal tract, half-life of mercury varies depending on what organ. You can see down here, mercury deposited in the brain can have a half-life up to several decades. I don't know what that implication that might have for some of our neuromuscular problems later on in life, but something to think about. And the half-life, 58 days in the rest of the body, I mean, that's a half-life. You remember half-life is like, okay, I got this whole pound of butter, and I cut it in half, that's the half-life, and then cut that in half, and then cut that in half. I mean, a half-life goes on forever. I mean, the amount's reduced, but you still have stuff there. So this isn't like elimination. This is a slow elimination. What happens to 80% of the mercury absorbed into the body from dental amalgams? Well, mercury binds to an enzyme. That enzyme no longer functions. Now, the enzyme on testing will look the same. So if you go in and, I don't know, just pick an enzyme and have your physician check thyroid or something else about low on T3, T4, yeah, they'll come back. Hey, you got plenty of that. But if there's mercury bound to that enzyme, it doesn't work. And they can't test for that. What happens is, an enzyme is like a key. It goes into that cell and it fits one way. Now, if there's a mercury bound to it, it changes the shape. It no longer fits, so it doesn't function. Also remember, a lot of these enzymes are detoxifying enzymes. They're designed to help you get rid of the bad stuff, mercury and whatever else comes into our bodies that we don't want. Once mercury binds to that, it's not functioning, but it's still there chemically. And enzymes are sulfur. These are all thiol groups. They contain sulfur, which mercury has a very strong affinity to and forms a covalent bond with that enzyme. So it's very hard to break. Mercury will bind to sulfur groups, which are thiol groups, and disrupt the function of the enzymes. This is a list of, I said earlier that you're going to. There's 1,000 things that sometimes mercury is being blamed for. 10 years ago, and this happened. This will happen to you if you guys. North Carolina's got the strictest dental board I think in the country. I've been. I don't want to say in trouble with the board, but investigated twice because the first time 10 years ago, I said something. This is my point being here: be very careful of what you say and how you advertise. You know your board better than I do. But I spent $10,000 defending myself because in one of my advertisements I said excellent care through caring hands. That was my motto. Well, you can't be exemplary or something when I forgot the word. You can't say excellent or excellence. You have to say good care. You can't be on that upper level with the North Carolina State Dental Board. So once they got hold of that, they started looking at my website and blah, 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 and went deeper and deeper and deeper. I was down in front of the board a couple of times, never for a patient complaint, never malpractice or anything like that, but they don't like us doing what we're doing. And now recently in the last year, I've had the same experience, always turned in by another dentist. That's the interesting thing. Folks are jealous about the success of people doing what we're doing, and they look at your ad and go, whoa, state board, look at this. So be careful, be careful. This latest one, what was it for? But I had another $10,000 to defend myself. And I had to take a bunch of my stuff out of the website that was mercury information that you, like this. And it was fine. I mean, I resented, you might say, losing the argument, but I won the war in that my patients who come through the website already know this stuff. So it's a little redundant. I guess I was trying to capture a segment of the market that didn't know it. So taking this out had no effect on our referrals. So just be careful what you say and make sure, but if you get in trouble, it's going to be from a colleague who is jealous of what you're doing. But you can see here, I mean, there's a lot of stuff on this. Headaches, you got endocrine disruption, fatigue, respiratory problems, renal problems for sure, cardiovascular problems. I'll speak a little bit about that later, dermatological. And this one here is interesting because this, oops, wrong button. I knew I'd do that. No, it won't go back. All right. But at any rate, there's a myriad of effects that mercury can have on people. And it doesn't mean everybody's going to get that, but there's going to be people who do from mercury exposure. Mercury is a neurotoxin, and exposure is very dangerous, which I've been saying. The toxic experience varies by individual, just as poison ivy does for me, maybe not for you. I am not gluten intolerant. I can eat that, no problem, as far as I know anyway. Maybe that's half my problem. I'm eating gluten and don't know it. And I got a problem with it. It's probably a mental thing, not so much digestive. A combination of symptoms can occur, coexisting factors influence The personalized reaction, as I said, that's the point. Not everyone in this room is going to come down, or many in this room aren't going to come down with a neurological problem with mercury, but somebody is. There's going to be a group of people who do. And dentists, I mean, good grief, of any occupation. You know, the interesting thing about mercury in OSHA, I mean, you guys have OSHA inspect, you hire somebody to come in and check your office. Do you do that? Well, actually, we do. We have a yearly exam from an attorney who he just comes in and checks our labeling, checks this, checks that, give us a little lecture on this stuff. And I ask him every time he comes in, why aren't you checking anything for mercury? I mean, it's OSHA. You're supposed to be protecting the employees, and I'm an employee, I'm incorporated. Well, there's no real mandate on mercury. We don't have any information on that. Well, here he's worried about my alcohol bottles are labeled alcohol. You know, and we could be spilling the mercury, if we used mercury, on the floor, and he's not even concerned about that. You know, OSHA should be protecting dental offices, and they're not. They don't care at all. We use, in the United States, 40% of the mercury that's used in this country is used in dentistry. That's scary. 40% of the mercury in streams and rivers come from dental offices. When you flush that stuff down the sink, down the whatever it goes through, your suction system goes right out into the sewer system. When it does, it goes into streams and rivers. I'll have a little bit on that later. So a lot of mercury is being pumped into our environment through dental offices. So we have mercury separators, and we've had it for 25 years. We've had mercury separator, well, 25 years. That takes 99% of the mercury out of our wastewater, so it doesn't go into the environment. Now, I just got a letter from my county last week saying that we suggest dental offices ought to have mercury separators. So it's like, hallelujah. There's 3 dentists in my county, so the other 2 are going to have to get one, I guess. All right, back on topic here. One of the combinations can be present. Coexisting factors influence this personalized reaction. One of those is lead. You know, with fluoridated water, which is the worst thing I think that ever happened, well, one of the worst things that ever happened in this country, there's a lot of fluoride. The fluoride put in that water is a trash heap of heavy metals and junk, and lead is part of that. So if you have lead and mercury, the synergistic effects are much higher. A lethal dose of mercury and a lethal dose of lead, it kills 100% of the people, goes up 100 times with the combination of lead and mercury. So this is what they're talking about. There's other things in our environment that are infecting or increasing the effect of the mercury toxicity and previous exposures. We're in a chronic situation here. Again, this is talking about allergies to mercury, Alzheimer's. These are the things that we look at. That antibiotic resistance is a big, big deal if you got mercury in your gut, and you guys do, I'm sure. Cardiovascular problems, hearing loss. Gee, I thought it was from the drill. Why I keep going, huh? But my girlfriend says I just don't hear her. That may be true. Maybe true. Periodontal disease, you know, that's for sure. So, at any rate, there's a lot of different things. Autoimmune disorders, that's really common. You go Lou Gehrig's again, Alzheimer's. There's a lot of stuff that says Alzheimer's is connected to mercury. I don't doubt it, but there's still a lot of science left out on Alzheimer's right now. And reproductive function, that should be interesting to assistants and hygienists who are in that age group. You might want to think about that. So I'm begging your bosses to get going on this. All right. Okay, this is an interesting slide. And what you're looking at there is a photomicrograph of amalgam. And what you're seeing here is, back when we heard that little recording that Griffin played, and again, I signed up and said, my God, he's right, this is crazy, and here I am. But this is spherical. This is mercury that hasn't been dissolved in the amalgam structure. Remember he said it was perfectly mixed, completely mixed, no problem. Well, as this filling wears down, these mercury globules are exposed, and that's where you're getting the off gas of the mercury. And this has been documented. I mean, David Kennedy in the back of the room, we'll show you the smoking, I think that's smoking videos in there. They don't play for me, but yeah. Well, they never play for me, so I never know what those were on there. I am the most challenged computer guy in the academy, and here I am up here. I don't get it. You know, when I first was asked to take this over, Joe Palmer, a good friend of mine, he usually does this with me. He said, Bill, you can't do that. You don't even have a computer. And I said, well, I'll go buy a computer. He said, oh, man, you don't know what you're getting into. So I've made progress. Now, you got to admit, Dave's over there laughing. Not much, but some progress. But at any rate, that's the truth. Sarah, this is what you're looking at, and this is why we're off-gassing that mercury. We're not getting volume. Okay, all right. What we're showing here, David, he's in the back of the room. We ought to have him explain this. What we've got here is a 20-year-old amalgam filling in an extracted tooth. Okay, and what we got is behind here is a black light. And what David's doing is warming it by rubbing it with a pencil eraser. And now what you can see is the mercury vapor that's coming off this tooth. So just that little bit of warming. So consider putting a prophy couple on that amalgam filling. Consider putting a drill, the burr on that tooth or that filling. And imagine. So it's up to body temperature, and David's kind of rubbing that, and we got a black light behind there, and there you go again. But there you go. That's kind of scary when you think you're inhaling that, and 80% of that's being absorbed into your blood, your lungs. Now, another thing to consider about this is we'll call it secondhand mercury vapor. You know, we all hold secondhand smoke. Well, consider family members you're talking to or whatever, and they're breathing in and out their mercury vapor, and so are you. 20% of it's being exhaled, so you get the chance to absorb that. The other thing that would warm these up is toothbrushing, grinding your teeth, hot coffee, tea, whatever. Just chewing on the mercury filling warms them a bit, and it's going to off-gas more. The EPA limits on mercury exposure is this line right here, the red one. The California EPA is the blue line right here. And what this is showing you are tests that have been done over the years of mercury exposure in adults with dental mercury fillings. Some of these have been measured in different ways. We used to have a slide in here that measured the mercury over an hour after chewing gum, and it was amazing the parabolic curve that occurred. It took an hour for it to come back down after people chewed gum for 15 minutes. So again, brushing your teeth, hot coffee, grinding, crunching, all that's going to release mercury vapor. But you can see that, you know, we got what? A study here and a study there that are under the line. Everything else is over the EPA's. So where's OSHA on this? Why aren't they doing something about this in offices? I guess the ADA does not want them to do anything about it. Okay, and research published in 2011, Mark Richardson, a really, really good guy at HIP Canada, he's a researcher. He said, and this is 2011, more than 67 million Americans aged 2 years and older exceed the intake of mercury vapor according to the EPA. That's 67 million of us. Now, also, I think this was done with, I think it was 6 surfaces of amalgam. 6, like MODFL is 5, and an occlusal on another tooth is 6 surfaces. That's the number came up with. And over 122 million exceed the intake of mercury vapor considered safe by California. Now, I don't know how California drew up their standards, but they're a lot more stringent than the EPA's apparently. Individual response to dental mercury exposure is based on personal circumstances such as how many mercury fillings, how big are they? Dental plaque, okay, you got chemistry going on there with plaque on the filling, you got a whole biosystem, and Phil Malik will talk about that a little bit later. A large number of people are metal allergic, and you got prior exposure conditions, current exposures, genetic predispositions, Some of us excrete mercury, some of us don't. You know, you have these people go in and get their hair tested and their blood tested for mercury. Well, the mercury is only going to stay in your blood, I think, maybe up to 48 hours. After that, it's gone. In your hair, well, if you secrete mercury, you're going to have mercury in your hair, which is a good thing, means you're getting rid of it. If you're a non-secretor and you don't have any mercury in your hair, that means it's not coming out of your body. So you want to be a secretor. Autistic children, when they test their hair, which is, if they're not a secretor, it's not going to be there. They say, well, it's not mercury. Well, that's why they're probably autistic, is because of the mercury. And I think back in 1987, 84, it was 1 in 200,000 children, autistic male. Today it's 1 in 64. Something's going on. I don't know if it's mercury, fluoride, what the heck's going on. But it could be, very easily could be, a combination of what's going on in our environment, how many chemicals we've got out there now. Selenium levels. Selenium is a really good binder to mercury. It's also a detoxifier. I don't like to talk about consumption of alcohol, so we'll consumption of milk. Methylation in the body. So, yeah, a lot of stuff affects this. Now, this is a little confusing, but this just exposure matter. It's all about the synergy. You know, if you got lead, you got mercury, you got arsenic, and the more of these we have, and we've all got this in our body, you can't not have some of this. It's in our water. And not only that, but glyphosate Roundup. I have trouble with that word. Glyphosate. Glyphosate. Okay, thank you. Roundup. Roundup is in everything now. It's in all the food we eat. It's in the water. It's in the soil. It's in the air. It's being so widely used that it can be measured in your things you're eating, particularly corn, but I mean even in the animals that we eat. Kind of scary. So exposure to other metals and chemicals, and also how a person responds to mercury. You know, it decreases your immune system, which is going to make you more vulnerable to not only this, but Lou Gehrig's, flu, colds, MS. All these can be affected by your immune system. This is showing, obviously, a pregnant lady there laying down, but the point is scientific research shown increased number of maternal mercury fillings, increased the level in fetus and infants. Remember, mercury vapor, before it's ionized, passes through the blood-brain barrier and the placenta. So if mom's got a bunch of mercury fillings, the infant, the embryo, is going to have a bunch of mercury fillings. Hey, Nestor. Increased number mercury filling, increased in breast milk. Naturally, it's going to be there. Risk assessment should take size of development of children into account, but they typically do not. Another thing interesting when they mention breast milk, because breast milk, and this lecture isn't about fluoride, but you know, I think breast milk is like 0.07% naturally in mother's breast milk. Well, it's not supposed to be in these kids. Fluoride's not supposed to be in these children. Some of these formulas add it for strong teeth. Terrible thing. Terrible for developmental, but that's Dave's stuff. This is a cat study. This was a couple studies combined. One of these studies was done in Portugal in an orphanage. So there's no informed consent. They just took these kids, and when they did fillings on them, they put mercury fillings in there to measure how much it affected the kids. They followed it. Well, in an orphanage, you're going to follow them for a number of years. They don't get out till 18, I guess. So what they did, they followed them, and the study came up that there was no real effect of this mercury. And in fact, after 2 years, the mercury stopped coming out of the urine. Well, the problem with the test, one of them, Boyd Haley went into a lot on this, is that mercury doesn't come out through the urine primarily. It comes out through the feces. And they checked the blood. Well, as I told you earlier, mercury's only in the blood for maybe 48 hours. So the things they were checking weren't really relevant to what they were trying to find out. And in fact, on top of that, it stopped coming after 2 years because the mercury fillings were doing enough renal damage. The kidneys weren't taking it out anymore. So we went back a couple years later, and they looked at this research again, even some of the people that were involved in the original study, and discovered these things and said, this is bogus. But this came out as kind of like a reassurance that mercury was okay. It wasn't having an effect. In fact, it was. But it kind of reminds me, if you give General Mills General Mills, let's say, let's donate $1 million to the University of Minnesota, okay? They're in Minneapolis. And they want to test if Cheerios increases your testosterone level. Well, I can guarantee you that their research is going to show you that testosterone increases when you eat Cheerios. I mean, $1 million from a company like that goes a long way. So a lot of this research, it's designed before they do the research what the outcome is going to be. So it's not always something you can lay your hat on. Okay, now, excuse me here, my earpiece is coming off. Okay, did you slip this in on me? Lifetime of neurological damage and dental mercury related to specific genetic variants and noted. Dr. James Wood, part of the other study I mentioned earlier, 25 to 50% of people have genetic variants, which makes them more damaged, more problematic with mercury fillings. All right, this is a slide that I think this was in my textbook that Ralph Phillips wrote, and well, got out in '79. But we all know about galvanism. I mean, that's not a new topic. But, you know, we were taught back in dental school that you don't ever touch two dissimilar metals together. We were taught not to leave a mercury filling under a gold crown or a metal crown for that, PFM. Doesn't matter, is it going to be a galvanic reaction? And this galvanic reaction increases the release of mercury. And many times, right over here, you're going to see what we used to call an amalgam tattoo. It's from this galvanic reaction. The mercury is coming out of the filling. So if you have a gold crown up here and a mercury filling down here, there's still galvanic reaction across the arch. And a lot of these folks who come in, they want their mercury out. Once in a while, not very often, once in a while, they'll feel immediately better after all their mercury is removed and without any chelation by the physicians. Now, that's a galvanic reaction probably because, as I tell patients, I'm going to get it out of your mouth, but your physician has to get it out of your body. So let's get it out first. You go to a physician, and they start detoxifying. And in the meantime, they go and have a battery of tests. It's actually a urine challenge test that comes back and lists about, I guess, 20 different heavy metals. You take the sulfur compound, DMSA, and there's been collection. It's getting more and more. It used to be, I think you collected for 24 hours. Now it's down to about 6. But you collect your urine over that period of time and then send a sample in, and they'll give a panel of all the heavy metals in there. And it's challenged by the DMSA, which is a sulfur compound that's going to bring them out. It doesn't tell you how much is in the body, but it gives you a relative number of how bad it is. And then the physician goes with detoxifying you, chelating you, to get it down, and then you test later again to see where you are. And it's amazing to see the results. Even somebody who was mercury polluted like the dentist, I've gotten mine down where they can't find it. So that's good news. Allergies to dental mercury and other dental materials. Approximately 21 million Americans are likely allergic to mercury. Most dental patients are not tested for mineral allergies. I really don't do it in my office. I just get it out. I mean, you want to wait around and see if you're allergic to it, or you want to inhale the rest of this mercury, or you want to get it going. And most people say, yeah, got it there. Health conditions linked to mercury. Again, we got autoimmune fatigue, chemical sensitivities, oral lichenoid. I mean, the other thing that's interesting too, I don't know if there's correlation here. Have you guys seen a lot of Lyme's disease patients? I have got a buku patients who've been diagnosed, with Lyme's disease. And I don't know, it just seems like it's blossomed over the last. It used to be Rocky Mountain spotted fever years ago you'd hear about, but now, tremendous amount. I don't know if it's connected to mercury or not, but it sure doesn't be helpful. And now if they come in with that diagnosed and they're in there to get the mercury out, we're also taking out root canals. We're also taking out the rest of the mercury and giving them every fighting chance they can with their immune system to get back into good health. Because their people are miserable. They really are. Depends on how badly they're compromised, but they can't work sometimes, and it goes on for years. Mess. And again, oral galvanism. All right, this is a test. These are two different tests, actually, that you can use, Melissa and the ELISA test, to test for allergies to metals. And this is a little hard to read. I think that's nickel, methyl mercury, gold, cadmium,
Millennium. At any rate, you get the idea. So you can go with palladium, indium. So you can see the line, the marker. These are, how much. Now, women primarily are affected by nickel, particularly with cheap crowns, metal crowns, because they start wearing, I call it junk jewelry, costume jewelry at 5 or 6 years old. So they're already exposed to the nickel, which is high in those inexpensive earrings and whatever the kids wear. So they're kind of given a dose of it early on in life, plus a lot of nickels and braces, nickel titanium wire. So it affects women a whole lot more than it does men. I rarely see a guy come in with a cheap metal crown that has had a problem with, the tissue reaction around it, but women a lot of times. So what we do, we take them off and put an Emax crown on it, or an onlay. Mostly I do onlays. Okay, this is a good thing, and if we do this quite a bit, and this is what I said earlier. I don't know the exact cost of this. I'm going to say $250. Is that about right? $295. Okay. And what this does, it sends back a report. Now this thing is, I think, has 3,400 dental products in it. So you get an N, an S, or an S if it's safe or not safe. So what our assistants do, they go through this, and this has got etch, it's got bonding liquid, it's got composite, it's got a multitude of dental metals. I mean, you name it, it's in here if you're going to use it. And they'll tell you whether you can or can't. Now, we've gotten to the point now with Voco, which is our composite we use, and Emax, which is our onlay and crown material, do CEREC all the time. We don't really have a problem. Now, we're going to check this to make sure if the patient spent that. We're going to go through and make sure the etch we're using is okay. Now, the interesting thing, I don't know what goes into etch that's different. Phosphoric acid, I guess it's phosphoric acid, whether it's the coloring some of them use or what, but there are sometimes etches, the one we're using right now can't be used, and they'll show you which one can. Again, I don't know how much of a difference that makes. It's on the tooth for 10 seconds, but we adhere to what this report shows us. The patient paid for it, and they're expecting us to do that. But 99 out of 100 times, what we're standardly using today, because we've gone through this so many years, is going to be compatible. And there's 2 different companies that do that, is Biochem and then Clifford Counseling. I use Clifford. Jess is a great guy and been in this academy for many, many years. While dentists do not prescribe pharmacological age drugs or supplements for mercury testing or detox, it's important for them to understand the test and the protocols. When that patient brings back that heavy metal challenge test I talked about earlier, you got to know how to read that. And you got to be up to snuff on the rest of this stuff. Growing our patients are seeking biological dentists to remove the mercury fillings. And I tell you, it's a growing market. It's not just a little bit of the market. It's a big section of what we do every day. Again, I said everybody gets treated the same, but there's more and more people coming in saying, I want the mercury out. And more alternative physicians referring patients in to get the mercury out before they can get chelated. So it's something you really want to look at. And again, as I mentioned earlier, you got to be good at it. You got to adhere to the protocol. Okay, and again, we'll talk about it a little bit later, but remember, you're not a physician, you don't chelate these patients. The only chelation I guess I do is give them some vitamin C. I give them 5 packs of Live On vitamin C. That's the brand. It's 1,000 milligrams absorbed into the small intestine. No stomach upset, no stomach problem at all. There's sometimes you can do a vitamin C cleanse. Take enough vitamin C Sunday morning, reading the paper, and don't go to the mall. You're gonna go into the room, and that's a good healthy thing. But you give somebody that much vitamin C in these packs I'm giving you, they won't get home. So Live On Labs has a great product to help. And vitamin C is, that's not a problem, giving that to a patient. All right, heavy metal testing, chelation, other detox. There are a variety of tests for mercury, other heavy metals, and there are a variety of chelation and detoxifying protocols. Each health practitioner has personal preference for testing. Let them do that. Biologic dentists should learn about these tests to better serve. Many patients ask their dentists for referrals to practitioners, which I get all the time. Patients come in, they've got Lyme disease or blah, 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 and I get them to 2 or 3 different people in Winston. I'm in Yadkinville, which is about 20 minutes outside of Winston. I'm in the country. I think our county has 30,000 people maybe, I don't know. This is one of those things that you don't have to be in a big city to be successful. People will travel to you to do it. I have people coming out of Virginia, Roanoke area, up from Charlotte. They come from the east coast of Virginia, eastern shore of Virginia. They'll travel to get to you, and they find you, as I said earlier, on the website. So your website's got to be good. It's got to be up to date. It's got to be having the latest protocol that we're going to talk about. But I advise you, I can't say enough, that's the way to get these folks in. And they will find you, trust me. And get hooked up with some alternative physicians, refer back and forth, and that's a great source. And as long as that physician knows you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, you're going to be in good shape. All right, learn about these tests. Many patients ask their dentist for referrals, as I do. I've got a list of 3 or 4 people in practices in Winston in the area. Okay, out here. Okay, dental amalgam results in substantial quantities of toxic mercury. We talked about 50% of it's mercury, released annually into the environment. Once in the environment, mercury pollution damages animals, plants, the entire ecosystem, while creating hot spots that last for centuries. You know, again, I can't stress enough, get an amalgam separator, mercury separator in your basement or some part of your office, so whatever comes out of your office is not, 99% clean from mercury. You can't do enough for the environment. Because understand that, we used to think, gee, we're going to be protecting people's health. That's how we're going to promote this idea. Well, in fact, what we need to be doing is promoting the environment. The environment's all the rage right now with hot climate change, climate warming, whatever the heck you want to call it. But if you put a mercury filling into somebody's tooth, you just put it in the environment. I mean, it's out there. Because what they're doing is breathing it, exhaling it, they're excreting it in the feces, and when that person dies, where do they go? They either get buried or they get cremated. So if they're buried, there it is down in the groundwater to go back into the environment. If they're cremated, up into the environment. So whatever you do with that mercury, it's in the environment. I mean, you can't get it out of it. So think of it that way. Health conditions are one thing, but we're all trying to save the environment. It's a good thing. I'm not knocking that, but think of it that way. And this stuff doesn't go away easily. It stays there forever. Now, this is a little part. We all have these. I've got 2 of these in my office. And this is one of those things you see. It's about 7 feet tall and goes to the floor. Well, there's it starts here and goes way down there. But what it is, it's a kind of a road map. And it shows you when the mercury comes in to this is the septic system here. Great idea I used to think years ago too, along with my pro-mercury amalgam thoughts, that what a wonderful thing. We're going to use this sludge from all this stuff. What a great fertilizer. Well, what they're doing, you dump it on the fields, and you're just redistributing the mercury that was separated out in the sludge at the septic plant. So you've got now mercury all over the cornfields, wheat fields, bean fields, or whatever, to be reabsorbed into the plant. Well, not be a bad idea if they could take all the chemicals out of that sludge, but they can't and they don't. So what you can see, so you got here, you got it going in the groundwater, you got it going into the air, you got it going back into the plants that they're growing, but 340 tons of mercury per year in dentistry is used in dentistry. Now, that's a metric ton. So a metric ton is 2,402 pounds, I believe it's right. So that's even more than our ton. But think of that, a volume. So, 70 to 100 tons likely enters a solid waste system. That's where it's being eliminated primarily, is through the feces. So it's a lot of mercury and it's going back into the environment. But I encourage you to look at that chart. It's really interesting. I got 2 of them in my office. All right, we hit on amalgam separators. This is the one I've got here. I've had it for, 20 years. There's no mechanical parts. The wastewater comes in, goes into this box, and everything drops to the bottom. Used to be once a year I'd get that changed. Now I've got an associate, so we're getting it changed twice a year. But Rebec will send you a letter confirming it's being recycled, so it's just not going out into the waste dumps in Seattle, where they're from. But these things are highly effective, relatively inexpensive, and maintenance-free. All you got to do is change the cartridge. Again, in our office, I have the Patterson rep do it. And I actually bought him a mask So when he does this, or the assistants clean out the traps, they're to wear a mask before, mercury breathing mask before they change that out. But this is what you're going to definitely want to do. And the EPA standards for dental clinics to reduce mercury waste went into effect in 2017. I'm just getting a letter in 19 saying, you better get one of these. It's like, yeah. So anyway, you got to check up on them. But when you send this back, they take care of it, and then they I don't know what the cost is. It's minuscule in my overhead. But I wouldn't practice without one. Okay, change. And which separator is right for you? Well, you got to consider the size of your office, how many chairs, how many dentists you've got in there. I don't know how many different separators are available. I thought there was just these two sizes. I don't know if there's bigger or smaller or not. And then again, how often do you need to get it changed? Rebec came back to me several years ago and said, look, when they're coming in, they are full. We better start doing this more often. So that's why I said we went to twice a year. Well, I've got an associate now she's here, Mary Catherine Taylor. Wonderful lady. God almighty. One of the best things I ever did was get an associate. I thought for long, oh man, I don't want another wife. I've had them. But even as a male associate, been the same way. But what a wonderful lady, and God, one of the best things that happened to me in the last many years. Really a delightful lady, very bright, very, very good dentist, and people are loving her. And after 40 years, you start thinking about, maybe I need an exit plan of some kind here. My staff's been with me for 35, 40 years, and of course the patients have, so you just don't up and leave and say, hey, bye guys, gotta go. Well, it's something, the health implication. What happens if you had some kind of problem with your health? You're not there. Your staff depends on their wages. The patient depends on the dentistry. So this makes for a wonderful transition, but has nothing to do with this slide. But anyway, I digress. I do that sometimes, How often it will be changed? Wait a minute. Anything else you want to know that's just off the cuff, I'd be happy to talk about. So research a little bit, and it's not a complicated thing. It really isn't. Okay. I am pushing the right button. There we go. Okay, occupational exposure essentials. Dentists, dental professionals, dental staff, and dental students are occupationally and chronically exposed to mercury. I mean, yeah, we've been through that. This includes mercury release during hygiene, cleaning, and polishing procedures. Do not clean a mercury filling. Don't polish it. Do not. In my office, they do not go over that little rubber cup. And you want to hit it with a sandblaster. What's that thing? ProJet, thank you. Yeah, you don't want to do it with that either. People don't seem to like that anymore. I think it's funny. It blows the junk all over the office, but it splatters. My hygienists, I don't think rarely use that, and they use a scaler and a I don't know what they do. I'm not in there, but I don't see it used very often. Okay, and also, talking about includes mercury release during removal of old mercury filling. Well, that's what we do all day. That's what we do. We take out mercury fillings, big and small. So remember, even if the dentist stops using dental mercury, he's not mercury-safe, he's mercury-free, but that's not a safe environment. And consider, if you're not using the precautions we're going to talk about, that mercury is all over your floor, mercury vapor, mercury particles. If you got carpets, even worse, you can't get it up. So you got to be, and again, gets in the air filtration system, so even the front office out there is getting their daily dose of mercury, not as bad as what the operatories are, but you're sure getting it. And traditional recommendations in mercury hygiene help, but these are safety measures, protective enough. This is hard to read. It's talking about storing mercury in unbreakable, tightly sealed containers like Griffin started off with this morning. We were told to put it in oil. I don't know what kind of oil it was, but keep that cap on. Never thought about, it's like, it's not toxic waste when you put it in their mouth. It's an amalgam filling, and very durable, very good, no harmful effects. And when you take it out, it's toxic waste. So what happened to that filling? Why is it toxic waste when you're removing it, but it's not when it puts in the mouth? I guess saliva has something to make it toxic, I'm not sure, but you don't forget to get your little tight jar there. Perform all operations involving mercury over areas with impervious and suitably lipped surfaces. And this goes back to carpet. Do not have carpet in the operatories. You need vinyl, some kind of flooring, hard flooring. And they're talking about actually titurating amalgam, which I haven't done in 25 years. But, you know, you got to be real careful. You don't want to breathe that mercury. And yeah, I'll show you in a minute here how much mercury comes off those capsules when you open them, because they're heated. Don't forget that. They say don't heat mercury, amalgam filling material. Well, that heats it. Titration heats it for sure. And you want to be able to clean it up. You got to vacuum it like your high-speed suction. You never want to put a vacuum cleaner on it if you spill it on the floor. No way. It blows it over everywhere. And no touch technique. I mean, golly. Salvage all amalgam scrap and store it in water again. Avoid carpeting dental operatories. We talked about that. Eliminate the use of mercury-containing solutions. I don't know what that is. Avoid heating mercury. We talked. Use water spray and suction. Yeah, we've all done that. Except when we were dental students, I didn't have an assistant. You know, I couldn't see when that water came on, so a lot of stuff was done without water. Those poor people. But poor me too. Well, you know, I was sitting there breathing it with them. You know, it's funny. We used to have to do, I go off in tangents, you probably haven't noticed. My sister was one of my unfortunate patients in dental school, and we had to do gold foils. I'm sure many of you remember gold foils. Don't make a living doing that. But after 42 years, those gold foils looked like the day we were put in. So it's amazing, some of these old restorations. And, you know, I had a lady come in the other day with a bunch of gold crowns and onlays done 40 years ago. They're absolutely gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. You know, but even at Chapel Hill, and again, I digress, Chapel Hill, North Carolina, they do not teach onlays. They quit doing it years ago. They teach crowns. To me, it's like, whoa, that's crazy. Why destroy that tooth to put a crown on it when you can do an onlay? But they quit teaching, and I don't know exactly why. I guess because nobody does onlays. They just do crowns on teeth. At any rate, all right, so anyway, what's that say, the bottom there? Have periodic mercury vapor level determination. You can do that. There's ways of testing that. Okay, so that's enough of that, I think. Okay, here's the slide that, you know, people aren't aware of, and here's what happens when you open that amalgam capsule, that titurated amalgam capsule. This is the limit. EPA limit is 100 micrograms. Well, you got 400 opening that capsule, okay? Open chair-side trap. As I said, you know, the ladies have to wear their mask when they do that. I bought my Patterson rep a mask, so when he changes my separator out or has to work in that unit, he's got to wear that mask. And I don't think he probably does any other office, but he doesn't mind. Drilling with no water spray, well, you wouldn't think about doing that. I mean, we all have at some point, but there's 1,200 micrograms. Drilling with water, 460, still above that number. Drilling with water and suction, okay, greatly reduces that. And there's been some studies where Dave and Matt and Joe Palmer, you'll see some of this later. In fact, they're all getting their master's degree from the work they did on what happens in the operatory, because once you take that, what we did, we sat down, I was with them when we did this, it was scary. We had mannequins where they put mercury in their teeth. We prepped them, put mercury in their teeth, and then we went in to remove all that. Well, we did it in a bunch of different stages. And Griff, I don't think this is going to be talked about in detail, is it?
You're going to show smart evidence.
Are they? Okay, I'll shut up about it. But this very, very important study. My point only being that this mercury particle goes all over the office, all over you, all over the patient. It's just not the mercury vapor. We measured, and we had industrial hygienists come in, and they did patch testing on the patient and the dentist and the assistant. Numbers were off out of the chart. It was amazing how much that was coming off without using proper protocol. And again, we got down here, polishing prophies, 500 to 900 hygienists, way over EPA limit. Where's the EPA? Where's OSHA? How come nobody's screaming about this? We're harming people. Research demonstrating the occupational hazards of removing mercury filling. Apparently, the single latest source of mercury exposure, as I showed you from the WHO, World Health Organization, is amalgam fillings, mercury fillings. The dose of mercury contained in amalgam particulate inhaled with the removal of just a small filling far exceeds that associated with the inhalation of mercury vapor contained within the general dental operatory. So it's a lot of mercury being discharged. So be careful, be aware, be safe. Excuse me. All right, publications, the IAOMT members, this is what I was referring to, the study that Dave and Maddie and and Joe were involved, and I was involved in the original dangerous process of it when we were removing the mercury and measuring all that. And it shows that safety thresholds for mercury exposure can be exceeded during dental procedures, way high, way high. And again, I hope they go through that tomorrow, involving drilling of amalgam, mercury fillings. I never call them amalgam fillings. I'm doing that because it's what's written. I always call them mercury fillings. It's kind of like corn flakes. You know, the number one ingredient is corn. So the number one ingredient in a mercury filling is mercury. So to me, they're mercury fillings. Okay. Shows that safety top thresholds for mercury exposure can be exceeded during dental procedures. Yeah, we know that. Further indicates that standard methods appear to be inadequate when assessing mercury exposure during drilling on dental amalgam because these methods do not account for an overlooked source of mercury vapor emitted from the particles, as I mentioned. Now, these microparticles are flying off that burr, and they're flying onto the floor, on the counter. They're airborne. You can see them. You can see them with the testing we did. You can see them in the air. Actually, what we did, we started with no safety measures, just drilled the mercury out with no water and measured. And then we finally, at the end of the trial, 10 different steps, we did all of our precautions on the teeth, and the numbers went dramatically down as far as the exposure goes. So it does work. That's what we're trying to test, to see if, in fact, what we're preaching is true, and it is. We got lucky on that one. Also emphasizes that specific safety measures can mitigate these mercury levels and provide more rigorous protections than dental workers. Well, we're dental workers. This slide demonstrates, not very clearly, but what we're using a high-speed vacuum. Dave's got his mask. He's fully gowned. It's got a hood, same as the assistant. Now, what you can't see very clearly is this is not a rubber dam. This is a nitrile dam. It's vinyl. You can't use rubber dam. Mercury vapor goes right through rubber dams. Just passes right through. In fact, you got to have suction underneath of that dam. I think that may be that hose. Suction underneath the dam to catch whatever might have gotten through the dam. And of course, we use clean outs. We'll talk about that in a minute. But there's a lot of stuff that goes into this. And as I mentioned earlier, excuse me, this stuff has evolved. I didn't start out 20 years ago doing any of this stuff. You know, I was more protected. Back then, it was probably with a lot of water and suction. And then as the time went on, I just the techniques kept getting better and better, and you incorporate it. And people have come up and asked me, what do I got to do now? Well, what I did, and again, what you do is important to you, but I just started out, what I could at the time, I bought this high-speed vacuum. I think that was one of the first things I bought. And then after meeting, I just kept improving the protocol. So now we got everything, but you might not go out and get all of this at one step. You might acquire it over, a little period of time. I wouldn't suggest you do it 10 years, but certainly you want to do it as quickly as you can afford to, but you can't be Mercury-Safe if you're not doing what we're suggesting. There we go. Okay, Duplinsky. This is an interesting, this gentleman is a member of the Academy. He's also teaches graduate dentistry at Yale. Interesting, they don't have an undergraduate department, but they have a graduate department. I think is that the only graduate school that's like that? I don't know. It would seem prudent to advise the dentist consider using restorations that not contain mercury. So he did a study, and what it showed, he did a study of dentists over the years, retired dentists specifically, and indicated that retired dentists, maybe true of assistants too, I don't know. But remember, the dentist takes out every mercury filling, and the assistant's probably there for half of them, but had the highest rate of neurological, neuromuscular, and cardiac prescriptions of any retired group. Now, we were just proud because we were the highest alcoholics of any profession, and highest divorce rate, and the highest suicide rate. But no, now we have the highest rates of these type of prescriptions. And I'm not blaming the divorce or the alcoholism or from mercury so much. We used to think it was just the stress of the job. Well, after a while, you get used to that. I mean, I hate being at the dentist. I don't like being there. It's like, I can't get over it. I don't take it personally. It's just how they feel. I don't like going to get a colonoscopy, but I don't complain to the guy. Not my idea of a couple 2 days a good time at all. I mean, I hate starving and I hate recovering from whatever drug they gave me. But boy, am I hungry. Whew. That next day, look out. Yeah, they're great. I love them. All right. So, at any rate, Tom will probably be here. He's a really interesting guy. And this is done by Dr. Warwick's daughter, Robin, and this is a study done as a student. And where'd she go in Canada, Dave? Where'd Robin go to school?
In University of Alberta.
Okay, yeah. And this is done as students. It's paramount that dental schools consider how dental students are trained in the subject of mercury hygiene. Yeah, when removing dental mercury fillings as well as other procedures, when mercury exposure may occur, they must also train dental students in the effective use of personal protective equipment in order to prevent occupational exposure to mercury while in dental school and in clinical practice. Now, it all starts here in the dental schools because, one thing IAOMT has been doing in the last several years, we invite for free students to come in. I don't know how many we have this year, Griff. 27 students that'll be here tomorrow. I'm going to lecture to them Saturday morning, but no, they're here Saturday, isn't it? Saturday and Sunday? Or Saturday, yeah. Probably are. There's students in the room? Right, okay, great. Glad you're here. Yeah. So the IMT decided to start sponsoring these students to come and start getting this early before you're completely indoctrinated with what the schools have to teach you. So we'd recommend don't go back and talk about this. Probably not a good idea. You got to graduate, number one. Get that certificate and then go do this. So, but at any rate, we're trying to change the world slowly and start at the bottom. So thank you for being here. So anyway, Robin's study here was exactly that, and done in 2013, and she was aware because of her father, Dave, what was going on here. So amazingly, this would never get done in Indiana. I don't know what the difference is in dental schools or what influence you might have. How much did you donate, Dave?
No, actually, it's kind of a funny thing. It's part of her curriculum.
Really?
To do a study, and then after she got about halfway through, they canceled the whole thing, but she continued on and got the thing published.
Okay, well, great. Well, this is where it needs to start. Students need to be aware of that. But as I said, they got to be accredited, and the ADA is not going to accredit you if you're saying bad things about a mercury filling. They're just not going to do it. Now, hopefully someday they will. They'll come around, but I don't know. I hope I'm still practicing. All right, additional occupational mercury research. This is just, all found higher levels of mercury in dental workers. That's not pregnancy, fertility, and gender-specific risks to female dental workers. Dentists had increased skin hyperpigmentation, respiratory disorders, as I said, irregular pulse, hand tremors, spasms of the upper extremities. I think the ADA did one of these studies on hand tremors and found that there was significant increase the higher the mercury level was in the body. Tachycardia, painful chewing, thyroid enlargement, fears. I mean, it's kind of a mishmash of whatever ails you. Neurological issues, I mentioned that, such as memory loss, concentration issues, fatigue, sleep disturbances, renal and memory issues. That's interesting, they're categories together. Depression, impaired visuomotor speed. So, I mean, there's a lot of stuff there, but the point is that stuff's not good for you. It's bad. We need to get it out of our mouths. We need to get it out of the environment. We need to quit using it. Eventually, when we quit using it, it will disappear. But it's going to take a while. All right, basic facts. Okay, common sense for amalgam removal. These are the reasons. They break, cosmetic purposes. People don't like black teeth. They want to be the tooth colored. Patient preference, allergies to amalgam. I've never, as I'm sure there have been, I've never had anybody come in with that complaint or a physician saying they're allergic to amalgam. I don't think the Melissa tests are being used, but regardless, just get them out of there. Removal, the dangers, exceeding the safe limit of mercury exposure. Every once in a while, I'll have a patient who is pretty frail. Health is not real good to start with. The physician might want me to take one or two out. Generally, I do quadrant dentistry. If I'm going to nub it, I'm going to do everything in that quadrant or maybe two at a time. But you can overload a patient, even with all the precautions. So you got to be kind of risk assessing there. If they come in and they got Lyme's and they're not hitting on much, they're just good to sit in the chair and that's about it, then you probably want to go slow. But I kind of let the physician tell me how they want me to do that. But the patients have reported sometimes, occasionally, that they felt lousy for a week or two after the removal. And even though we've done everything we can to prevent it, their bucket's full, they will react to it. So the danger to the patient and routine exposure to dentists and dental staff, we talked about that. We're in that room 8 hours a day, 4 or 5 days a week. That's a lot of exposure. Okay, secondary exposures. mercury exposure to staff, patients, and visitors in other parts of the office. I mentioned that. Environmental mercury exposure caused by the waste. We talked about that. Storage and disposal of workplace protective clothing and instruments. Right now, the workplace clothing is a problem. There is no cost-effective way to do that, and unfortunately, we're putting those protective clothing more and more likely in the trash. Instruments, you can spray those, and this is something to think about. You put those dental instruments into the autoclave, and they're full of mercury dust particles, and it goes poof, it gets heated up. Open that autoclave door, and you've got a plume of mercury. So there are some things you can spray on, sulfur-containing compounds to spray that can help that. Again, this is part of the sterilization of instruments. Mercury on the clothing. I mean, as soon as I get home, I change clothes before I leave the office. I work in my scrubs, call them pajamas, change before I go to lunch. I'll change before I go home. As soon as I get home, I get a shower. I just, boom, wash my hair, wash everything, because it's on you. I don't care how cautious you are. But carried home in clothes and clothing. All right, this is a SMART protocol. This is from our past president, Wise. He had this idea. He'll be here. He's a character. He's back. He's from Massachusetts. We're somewhere around here. He probably drove to this meeting instead of flew. How many people are local here? Just all right, cool. I haven't seen anything out of Boston yet. I've just seen the Uber ride in and the hotel. So I'm anxious to. What is this? Boston? Is this Boston Harbor out here? Boston Bay? Okay. All right. Okay, IAOMT research dangers of mercury. It constantly updates removal recommendations in science. So what the point is, we want you to get SMART certified. It's not hard to do. It's easier than getting accredited. It's easier than fellowship. This is the first step. Get that, and people know you're doing it properly. You might not have all the info we'd like you to have yet, but at least you're going to be practicing in the right direction. And so get that done, and you can become SMART certified. It'll be on our website. You can put it on your website so people know that you know what you're doing, because they will ask you. Built upon years of clinical research and experience from the IAOMT, completed PubMed literature search, 94 different articles, continual updates, safe mercury amalgam removal techniques with scientific citations. So our motto is, show me the science. But we just don't come up with something and say, well, you probably ought to do this because it looks good. We're going to recommend something after we've read the science. And if you go to our library, there is a ton of stuff out there on mercury and fluoride. Griff's going to speak tomorrow at 8. I highly recommend you be there for that on fluoride. He's got a ton of stuff. He's a real expert on that, along with David Kennedy sitting here down here. All right, now they said click in the middle of that. Now, how did that get to play? I couldn't get to play on my computer. Is there something in there, Griff? Okay, well, it said on my notes to click in the middle, and I never could get it to do anything. You just wanted your face on the slide. He's that way, He's weird. He's from Austin, Texas. And everybody from Austin's weird. All right, well, you want to say what it said?
No, go. I
Okay.
can
All right. All right. Protection. This is just showing some more of the stuff that we do. You can use a lot of things. I use N-acetylcysteine and vitamin C, but you can use a slurry of charcoal. I don't like charcoal and chlorella because one's black, one's green, and you get a patient to swish with that, and you play heck getting it out of the teeth, getting it out of the gums. It sticks everywhere. It's really hard to do a bunch of composites in the anterior after you've used that. But, it works. Full body impermeable barrier. You kind of see a little bit of that here. That's the patient right there. That's the vinyl dam. Full head, neck, and external air oxygen is always being delivered to the patient through a cannula or another device, whichever you prefer. I use the nitrous oxide head and just, sometimes they want nitrous, sometimes they don't, but I just use that to supply the oxygen. This, again, is a non-latex dam, nitrile. And we stopped using latex years ago because so many people are allergic to it, particularly nurses. So we don't have any latex gloves or dams, anything. Nothing's latex anymore. Saliva ejector, you can't see that, but that goes underneath the dam, hangs down the patient's side. This is what we call a clean out. This is a suction tube. This little plastic device fits down over top of the tooth so that it pulls the air this way so less chance of that mercury vapor escaping. And that, again, called cleanup. And they work very well. Copious amounts of water, we've been taught that from the beginning, to reduce the heat, which lowers the evaporation of the mercury. Section the amalgam into the biggest chunks you can with a small burr. You know, you don't want to go in there with an 8-round burr and section these things out because most of that stuff's just being thrown into the air. I use 330s a lot of times, 245, but you do what you want on that. But section it out in the biggest chunks you can, so you don't want to grind the whole thing out. It just increases the mercury exposure. And after removal, we take the dam off and the patient's mouth flushed. I'm using my headset here. I'm going to hold this thing. It hasn't stayed on my ears very well. Flushed out, and then we get, now what we do, we start out with a mixture of vitamin C and N-acetylcysteine. We make up a beaker of that in the morning, and then each patient swishes with that before the procedure and swallows, and then after the procedure, they swish and spit. So it helps to rinse the mouth out and prevent any, we hope, any more absorption of the mercury. And then we give them 5 packs of that Live-On Labs vitamin C that I mentioned and suggest they take one every hour. And there's no stomach upset with that, so it works out great. Yeah, so that covers that. All right, and these are just showing protective gowns and cover. You know, again, everything's nitrile, no latex. Okay, and these are some of the masks we're using. You'll see these at our exhibitors. This is the one I use, but I mean, there's a multitude out there. This is what we started out with. Every assistant, both of us dentists have our own masks. I've got 3 for different rooms, and we never, ever, ever think about taking a mercury filling out without us gearing up too. So like I said, this is just not about the patient. I don't mean to downplay the patient's safety, but it's certainly about our safety. And suction traps, I mentioned that earlier. You know, they've got to be, you got to have the mask on to do that, assistants. Don't open those things up without putting that mask on. Yeah, an office separator, we talked about that. High volume air filtration system like the IQ, that big hose, the elephant trunk. Open windows, well, we don't have that option. Compliance with federal, state, and local regulations for the proper handling, cleaning, and disposal of mercury. There aren't any that I'm aware of. Maybe in the fluorescent light bulb business or mercury switches, they're all over that. Chloralkali business, the people who make Clorox, yeah, they're big time mercury safe, but you know, the people who use 40% of the mercury in the country, doesn't matter. And IT encourages dentist-patient communication on the mercury amalgam removal. I mean, the smart checklist patients, dental staff, and environment protection you saw in the preceding 6 slides available, but you can see www.thesmartchoice.com. Alternatives to mercury fillings, glass ionomers, but then you got a problem with fluoride. I tell you, there's occasional time when I've got some unbelievably difficult spot where I'm trying to save somebody's crown, I will use glass ionomer. I know it's got fluoride in it, but sometimes I will do that. I don't ever use mercury filling though. Talk to the patient about it, use biocompatibility testing. We do as often as the patient will do that. You know, we give them the form and they got to go get it done. They got to go to the physician to get blood drawn, and then it has spun down and they send the serum off to be tested. So we hope you will join the SMART program. It will enhance your life, your patients and the assistants, your employees. But that's it. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, test. Thanks, Bill.
You're welcome.
So we were supposed to show you the SMART video, so I apologize. I'm not sure why it's not in there, but if you get a chance, go to thesmartchoice.com and you'll see the video. So, and it was made in my office, and we did that by design in that we wanted to show you guys the simplest and most cost-effective way to be safe. You don't have to wear the full white suits where you can't breathe. So watch it carefully, and we'll talk later, but I've got it down to, I think, $5.96 per patient. So it's very reasonable to protect yourself and your staff and the patient, okay?
If you guys have any questions, just catch me.
No, hang on. Let's do it now.
Okay, I thought you were out of time.
No.
Okay.
This time is for Q&A. So I've got a mic, and maybe we'll get one more. Anybody have a question? Wow. Okay.
I'm new to the IAOMT, and I have a question about using zirconium for inlays or onlays.
Zirconium?
Yes.
I don't use zirconium particularly because I do a lot of CIRAC, but I don't see a reason why you, because it's working? Yeah, I don't see a reason why you couldn't. We're using zirconium implants, and that's another thing. We're getting a lot of pushback from people not wanting metal implants. The titanium, some folks don't know the difference, but more and more people are saying, no, I want that ceramic stuff. Okay, fine, we can do that. But yeah.
And I'm probably talking directly at me because I think I have 8 amalgam fillings. Is it ever too late to remove them all at any age? Do you still get the benefit?
No, it's not. In fact, if you wait too long, they'll remove themselves. That's when they start breaking because they run out of mercury and they lose their integrity and they'll come out too. But no, I encourage, and I can't say this to patients, I can say this to you, get it out of there as quick as possible. And properly done. And I would also encourage everybody, if they're going to do this, get an alternative physician to work with you. You'll be amazed how much mercury is in your body when you check it. I mean, it is. We're not in a good profession for mercury.
So the question is, when a patient comes to have mercury removal, should we detox them before and after, or just after the mercury removal?
Do what before and after?
Detoxification.
Oh, well, we're not doing detoxification. That's the physician's job. Ideally, I would like to get a heavy metal challenge test done before we start, and then when the patient's done detoxifying with the physician. That way you got a real sense of where it's going and how much you're supposed to get out of there. But anyway, it can be done. A lot of people don't do it. They'll get the mercury out, then they'll get the physician to do the mercury challenge test, and then they go ahead through the chelation process. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Somebody on this side?
There are a bunch of detox kits available on Quicksilver. Can we use them? Like, is it okay for us to use them if we know a little bit more about those?
Quicksilver Scientific?
Yes.
What kit are you talking about?
I don't know the exact name of it, but there are a bunch of these cubes and all. Yes, all the cube. All those things are out there just to clean up for detox. I haven't used them yet, but I just want to know.
Are you talking about for yourself?
Not for the patients too.
Well, again, and Quicksilver is a great company. Chris Shea, he's got great stuff. But I would look at your state board. I wouldn't do it. And maybe I could, but I don't choose to. Number one, I'm using the vitamin C, and I'm saying to go to the physician. They're much more knowledgeable about this than I am. Okay, I'm just trying to be a dentist. I'm also a naturopath, but still, my state.
Whatever you do, make sure that you understand this fully before you do any of that.
Yeah.
Okay? Because that's where you get in trouble.
You don't want to get caught practicing medicine without a license. I've had friends lose their license, and they were doing good stuff. They weren't trying to be a jerk or doing, hurting anybody. They were doing what they thought was right.
I understand there's a spray for removing the mercury from surfaces before autoclaving and that sort of thing. Where could you get that product?
Oh, that used to be in our slides. It's available. It's a sulfur compound. I don't know. I forget where we order it from. I'll find out.
Well,
do you know, Griff?
It's on our Academy website. You
Yeah.
can find everything. We have the whole list of everything to get. It's real simple. So whatever you want to.
Yeah, it's just a spray, and you just put it on the countertops. You can spray it on the instruments before they go in the autoclave.
I noticed, as a hygienist, on some occasions some dark margins on Class 5 composites. Is that due to the charcoal, or is there an alternative to swish with?
Well, I don't know. I mean, most likely that's a bonding failure. Sometimes, you get that white line after you put a composite in. It's been over carved back or what have you, or didn't get a good bond etch, and that's going to turn brown, and that's probably what it is.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with mercury. Anybody else? We got time. Let's do it. Hands? No? Nobody has any more questions about this? Seriously? You're ready to go? Ready to do it on Monday?
There's also a question of when you have a patient seated and they have a few amalgams in their mouth. The amalgams look like they're not leaking, they're not breaking down. Can you tell the patient, this is mercury, it's good to get this out, or a lot of staff will tell me it's better just to say, well, if there's a crack in the tooth, then that's the reason why to remove it. Otherwise, you can get into trouble legally with that.
Yeah, in my office, we take intraoral pictures of everything, and I'll sit down. Sometimes I said, patients come in, I want my mercury out. Okay, fine, end of conversation. And do I go into a lengthy discussion with somebody that's not aware of mercury poisoning? Not really, no, because I don't have the time, number one. They probably don't have the interest. If they start asking some questions, I'll refer them to the IAOMT website to get more information. But the other part of that is if it's defective, if it's got a crack in it or decay, yeah. Otherwise, if they didn't come in asking for their mercury out, I'm going to leave that alone unless it needs to be replaced.
I can address that and make it real simple for you guys, because this is how I do it, and I've done it for 26 years this way and never had a complaint about this, okay? We're all dentists, okay? You're doing dentistry. You do your exam, you look at the fillings. If they look intact according to the standard of care, we all know what that is, then you list it as an optional replacement. That's what I do, is I say, the following teeth are optional, they're listed per your request, period. That's all you got to do. You're doing dentistry. So if there's cracks, or it's leaching or failing, those are that justifies you replacing a filling. Don't make this about toxicity. We know it is, but don't make it that, okay? And then you'll be fine. Yeah, pass this back.
So on that note, like if somebody comes to you looking for a more holistic approach to things and they have, say, Parkinson's disease or something like that, then do you go into that with them, or you still don't?
You still don't. You can share all the information you want to, right? You're smart, you're educated, you can share all that, but I would not make that connection. You don't have to.
Well, the patients that come in with Parkinson's many times are coming in to get the mercury out because their physician said this may be related. You may want to do this. And oftentimes I'll say to patients, people think, wow, how drastic, you're taking root canal teeth out of people. But, I say it's only a tooth, only a couple teeth. Your health's much more important. And in fact, it might not improve, it may not help, but it won't hurt anything, because these people come in with Parkinson's, MS, Lou Gehrig's. I mean, they're looking for a cure. They're looking for anything to help them. And, I tell them it may not hurt, but it may not help, but it won't hurt you. Okay.
My question is, do you charge more to do the smart?
Yeah, that's a good question. Some of us have different varying ways of doing that. Some have a mercury amalgam removal fee. I just raised my fees to cover it. My problem with a mercury removal fee is you've got 6 mercury fillings in that quadrant, or you have 1 buccal pit. And, to me, charging a couple $100 for a buccal pit above the cost of the filling, I don't feel good with that. So we just raised our fees on amalgam or composite or whatever we're doing to compensate for that.
Okay, and what about the time? Does using the smart system increase your time of?
Oh, God, yeah. Yeah. Not only that, the draping and all the stuff we do and the setting up, it takes time. That's why we raise our fees. That's what the mercury removal fee is for. As Griffin said, he's got us down to $6 or $7. Well, that's...
Have you ever used a dam? I mean, since school?
Yeah. I'm just thinking, how am I going to convince my...
Honestly, a minute and a half.
Maybe.
For me, maybe, from start to finish. To put on the gown, she ties it, head thing goes on, you put on the dam, and it's part of your protocol. It becomes very quick. But if you don't use rubber dams, because most of us didn't after dental school, then at first you'll struggle. But you get fast.
And, another thing is, I thought when it started this, we put our gas masks on, all this gowning. People are going to go, what are you doing? You're scaring me. And I had one patient ask that, and I said, it's about your breath. And, yeah, we laughed. But no, I mean, people don't ask anything about it. They just don't.
They actually appreciate it.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're showing that you care.
You are really different. And they see that, and they appreciate it.
You've already had 2. I can't give you another one. Is there any more questions? We have time for like 1. Okay.
We got one up here.
Where? Let's see how fast yours is.
Yeah. Some of the people do mention that once they remove the mercury, their symptoms do get worse with their general body and some stuff like that. So do you really have to mention to them that, and I'm a newbie, do we need to really mention to them, oh, you might feel some, change in your health, and do you talk?
Okay, I personally have never seen that. I'm not lying. 26 years, I've never, ever seen that, where somebody had a bad reaction after.
No.
Now, I've always had protective protocols in place, though. Even, since 1993, they still had the big air vac. We had rubber dams. We had the suction. We had the oxygen mask. Had quite a bit of our current protocol. So I've never seen that, but I know it happens, and I think it's because they're skipping some of the steps. Exposure.
Occasionally, even with all of the proper steps in line, somebody that's really on the edge, somebody whose bucket is full, can have a bit of a reaction for time.
If you're doing right, you're.
And
that's the
what
whole
I do
point.
next time, we just don't do as much work on them. We
You
don't
can
take
say
as many
whatever you
fillings
want to,
out.
but I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't talk about it. You had one? So we got time for one more. Let me sneak past you, please. Thank you. Oh, sorry.
Okay. In watching the videos, some videos, I've watched one where it said you want to remove the negative charged or the positive charged negative.
Okay, you're talking about the
mercury
readometer?
first.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah, we used to do that a lot. Hal Huggins, we took my staff out there several years ago, and he had a great course. He's gone now. He was a member here. I listened to Hal, and, it kind of made sense. We do the readometer where you got the voltage, and we mark it down in all the teeth. Well, if you do that tomorrow, the readings are different. Yeah. So what I tell my patients, and I don't do it much anymore, I said, look, I'm a dentist. I'm going to start with the ugliest tooth first, the one that needs treatment the most. And I'm going to work backwards because I don't want you to get a root canal and or this tooth break even more while we're working over here with a high reading. We're going to get them all out anyway. I just don't think it matters. Another thing he had, and again, I really respect Hal Huggins, he used to say you can't cross the midline unless you're using sedation. It's like, what the heck's that got to do with sedation? So we have people come in that are Hal Huggins, believers, and again, I'm not great guy. I just don't follow that protocol. So start with the worst dentistry. That's what I do, and I work backwards.